Today, my guest is Professor Mudambi. I'll keep my introduction short to maximize our time with him. In the next 30 minutes, we'll talk about Ram as a person, Professor Mudambi as a thought leader and an esteemed scholar, and then as a mentor to many PhD students and junior faculty. Ram is a fellow of the EIBA, was a co-editor at Global Strategy Journal, is an area editor at JIBS, and has been special issue editor for Journal of Economic Geography, Journal of Management Studies, International Business Review. And thank you, Ram, for joining us.
Thank you for having me, guys. This is a great honor.
So let me start. What did you want to become? What did you want to be when you were a child?
That's an interesting question. I'm an academic brat. I grew up on the campus of the University of Wisconsin in Madison, and my parents were both chemists. Back then, long ago, as you can see from the color of my hair, the University of Wisconsin was one of the leading centers, along with MIT and a few places in Europe, for chemistry in the world. There were several Nobel laureates on the faculty, including people like the discovery of vitamin A, the discovery of vitamin B complex, and so on. So I remember from a very young age, my parents' friends would come home for coffee, and they would not talk about trying to publish a paper or do a research project. They would be talking about what is the kind of research that would lead to a Nobel Prize. So this was sort of my my upbringing, and I sort of thought this was, I guess it must have gotten into my my bloodstream, as it were, because at the time, of course, I was very young. I was whatever, 6, 7, 8 years old. And I thought this was all a waste of time. I thought that I really wanted to be a cowboy. I thought it was much more interesting to have a gun and a horse and that sort of thing. But anyway, fast forward, I've always been very creative. I think I always wanted to create things. As an undergraduate, I really wanted to study history. I wanted to study English. These are two things that actually were my best subjects, I think, in my early years in college. I was very, I guess, merging the two. I really wanted to write sort of historical fiction. That was sort of my early ideas. Which I mean, I wrote, very in undergraduate numerous things. I've always been writing. Of course, academics are always writing. So, but my father rarely ever gave me any advice. But one of the rare times he gave me advice, he said, "Well, you can major in history and English, but remember that you don't come out of a rich family, so you're not gonna. You have to think a bit about getting a job." So I took that to heart and switched to economics and mathematics, and graduated in economics and mathematics. Went on to the London School of Economics. I studied under Amartya Sen and people like that, who did actually win the Nobel many years later.
This is very interesting, actually. All the top people in our field, they always start pretty much how much they like history, how much they wanted to be historian, but because of money, they switch to economics or political science or something related. This is very interesting. So can you pinpoint the earliest moment of awareness between domestic versus foreign?
Domestic versus foreign. That's a very interesting. That's an interesting perspective, I must confess. I hadn't thought of it that way. I mean, when I was young in Madison, Wisconsin, playing with other children, I thought I didn't think I was any different. I just thought I was an American, just like anybody else. And it was a shock to me when my parents decided to go back to India. In my middle school years, and all of a sudden I discovered this other country that I didn't know anything about. And I went there. Of course, I went to India for my high school and undergraduate. But I guess, yeah, there was definitely, I guess, a very early binational imprinting in a way, I guess. So I definitely had an idea of maybe in a almost a kind of a cultural way. I think Mira Yoko Brown talks about this a bit, the whole idea of the stereotype, right? So basically, because I grew up in America at a time when there was a stereotype, what it meant to be an American. And, the whole cowboy ethos and very, European type ethos. And the whole, back then, at least, the whole idea was about fitting in, right? So basically becoming fitting into the European ethos and becoming that.
Interesting. So what's something not many people know about you that's not on your CV?
I'm sorry, I didn't follow.
What is something not many people know about you that is not on your CV?
Oh, on my CV, yeah, well, I guess my CV is pretty professional. To do with research only. I guess my personal self-image is I think of myself as a writer, and I guess more and more recently, more and more of as a novelist rather than maybe an academic writer, because that is an image that is perhaps not public. And I race bicycles. That's another thing, I guess. That's a very deep. I have been racing bicycles for 35 years, so it's very much a very part of my DNA. It's a very it's a sociological thing, I guess.
How many miles do you ride a day?
Like this year, because of COVID, it's been a very big bicycle riding year because there's a lot of flexibility. So I'll probably end up riding, I don't know, 12,000 kilometers or something this year.
Wow, it's something. It's something. If you stopped doing what you're doing today, what would be your second best alternative career path?
Well, second best is, I think, always very difficult to say, right? Because all of us have dreams that we would probably be, maybe a first best. I mean, oftentimes, again, as economists point out, right? I mean, ultimately, life is all about a theory of the second best. So what you actually are in life, for most people, is the second best. And so like Ilga is probably, in your dreams, you might have wanted to be, I don't know, a painter or a movie star or who knows what, but in real life, you are what you are. And so similarly, I mean, all of us have, I guess there's this Walter Mitty in all of us, right? Idea of, what we would like to be. So yeah, so I'm twisting your questions and sort of say, obviously, I would have liked to be a very successful novelist. I mean, and then, and maybe it'll happen. Who knows? One of these days. But but of course, I'm very happy with my life. I mean, I'm very happy with the way things have turned out. And I think if young people watching this were watching this, I'd like to say to them, never underestimate the value of luck.
Yep.
And I think when I was young, one of the things that I was, well, yeah, when I was in my 20s and 30s, when I was in my PhD program as young assistant professor, I was very arrogant. And I thought, I'm very smart, and therefore I'm going to achieve, what I get is not, I should be getting more than I'm getting. Really, I should be in a better place, I should be getting a bigger salary and blah, 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 all these sorts of things. Many young people think that way, right? Because ultimately, we are in academics, we are, by definition, we are smarter than average, right? If we weren't average, we wouldn't be in graduate school. So we all have fairly high IQs. And the thing to remember, as I get old, now when I'm, I guess, old, I guess I can say that if you're a young person, look around you and think the following, that, everybody in this profession is smart. So being smart is not a unique thing. We're all smart. And there are lots of people who are smarter than you. And there are a few people maybe who are not as smart as you, but at the end of the day, we're all smart. And given the fact that you're in a subsample of extremely smart people, being lucky and being nice are very valuable traits. You can't control your luck, but you can control how nice you are. And so being nice to people rather than being arrogant is a very important characteristic throughout your career, but I think most importantly early in your career, because this is a network business, and ultimately your success is extremely contingent, and your luck is extremely contingent on how many people like you. So a lot of people like Ilgaz, and Ilgaz is going to be more successful, right? Because when things come up or opportunities come up, and people think, "Oh yeah, Ilgaz, he's a good guy. We should think of him." You know.
Hopefully. So the last question in the personal segment is: what is the one thing you wish you would have done that you didn't? So we're talking about regrets. What do you regret the most?
Wow, that's a difficult one. I mean, especially for a lucky person, it's hard to. Like I say, I've been quite lucky, and I've a lot of. I realize very much that where I am, whatever success I've achieved is there has been the element of luck involved. Meeting the right people at a particular time, people who helped me, and so on. And I can't really think of anything. That's a very difficult one because you know, yeah, I can't. I guess if I had, now you put me on the spot. I wish I had started writing my novels 20 years earlier.
Yeah, you got more time ahead of you. Don't no worries. It's not a regret.
I wish I had started. I had not waited. And I guess, again, if there's a piece of advice to come out of that, I think that would be that if you're young, don't put it off. If there's something you really want to do, don't say, "Oh, I'll wait till I get tenure. Oh, I'll wait till I get a full." That's what I did. I said, "Oh, I'll wait till I get tenure, then I'll write my novel. I'll wait till I become a full professor, then I'll write my novel." And don't do that. You know, basically, life doesn't wait. So if you have a dream, go and do it.
Okay, now the research segment. You're riding your bicycle and it breaks down. You're stranded in a small village. You sought refuge in this small neighborhood pub, and the locals are curious about who you are, what you do for a living, and you're supposed to summarize your research to the audience that doesn't know you and haven't read your work. And they follow up, they ask you, why is this important for humanity? What do you say?
I think if I had to encapsulate all my research in one word, I would say the word is innovation. And to me, innovation is such a critical area for research because I think it is the one word that explains why we are not living in caves. The whole idea of human society, human progress, human prosperity, everything that we take for granted, even our ability to feed and clothe ourselves, is a function of innovation. And so it's the single most important endeavor of humanity, innovation is. And this is what I study. And this is why I think it's important. Obviously, I'm a bit evangelical about it. I think it's extremely important for this reason. But I think it is a fragile thing. And we know, in some ways, we know a lot about it, but there's some ways we still don't know so much. I mean, ultimately, I think many years ago, Milton Friedman said that the prosperity doesn't come from machines. And prosperity doesn't come from, prosperity ultimately comes from the institutions and the fragile ability of human beings to come up with new things. Now, we have this extremely fragile thing that is supremely important. And there's so much misconception about how it operates, how to encourage it. It is the root of one of the other mainsprings of prosperous economies, like entrepreneurship. Ultimately, without innovation, entrepreneurship is not a successful endeavor. And this is sort of what I tell people, you know, I guess intelligent lay people in a pub, be that, well, you know, just think about how you can encourage, nurture, facilitate the creation of tomorrow's technologies that will alleviate all of our social problems, all of humanity's problems. I mean, we're talking about COVID right now, and ultimately we're living through the COVID pandemic right now. And however, how is it going to be alleviated? I mean, it's going to be alleviated through innovation.
True, very relevant. So how would you, or what are the, what are a few of the omitted variables in IB research?
That's one can think of that in a very specific way or a very general way. So let me look at it. Let me answer it in a more general way. I mean, IB is about you know, basically cross-border economic activity. So I like to think of it a little more generally, and it sort of underpins what my research network that I've been, I guess, convening for the last dozen years and more, called IBGIN, International Business, Economic Geography, and Innovation. So as I said, innovation, I've already talked about innovation. I think it's the mainspring of economies and so on. But ultimately, international business tends to, I think, weaken itself when it overemphasizes the international aspect, not ultimately country A versus country B kind of aspect. I mean, not to say these are not important. Obviously, there are some things that are peculiarly national in character, like institutions and so on. But I'm thinking more in terms of international business holistically, should be thinking more in terms of space, geographic space. And one of the reasons why I believe that the technology life cycles are shortening, the pace of innovation is increasing, and so on, is for the simple reason that we have been able to harness many more hundreds of millions of smart people, brains, into the creative enterprise of humanity. We have been bringing in more and more geographies into the innovation process. You can give different names to it. You can call them emerging markets. You can call them, you know, frontier economies, or whatever you want to call them. But all of this is ultimately about overcoming space and encouraging, facilitating, leveraging connectivity. And ultimately, the mantra of the IBGIN Research Network is connectivity. We have been able to go faster and faster and conquer more and more technological space because we are connecting hundreds of millions of people, as we are indeed connecting right now across space through technology. And this connectivity is a very, very critical part of the progress of humanity. So I think if you were thinking about omitted variables, I think one of the things that we don't study enough, variables we don't actually spend enough time talking about, is these wires, these connections across space. I mean, way back in the dawn of IB, people like John Dunning and so on, they talked about these things. They talked about things like shipping lines and airline routes and so on. We see so little of that in the pages of JIBs these days, right? Ultimately, there is a whole web of the whole world is a web connected. How many times have you seen an IB paper which looked at the major internet pipelines and internet gateways around the world? Yet how much international business would occur if those were to disappear? Right, you're thinking about the volume of e-commerce and e-business, all this thing. Well, it's all being facilitated by these instantaneous connections. And we just say, oh, well, they're just there, you know, as though it's in the air.
So I would like to go off script a bit, and I would like to go back to your childhood days when you were having these dinner parties. These people coming to your house were asking the big questions, right? And I want to ask you, if you were to, with all this knowledge that you have already accumulated, with all this knowledge, if you were to start doing a new dissertation, what's the next big question in IB? What's the next 5 to 10 years in IB? One question that will open up new frontiers, in your opinion?
Okay, maybe this is a very personal to me, and maybe it wouldn't appeal to people in general. But to me, I think a very critical part of, I think, virtually unresearched area in international business, and actually, if you think about it in management and even in economics to a large extent, is understanding the role of serendipity. You know, if we were to look at, we can sit around in a pub with a bunch of Ph.D. economists or management scholars, and we can tell stories. And we often tell stories, and journalists write books about these things. How did Silicon Valley start? How did Bangalore start? How did IBM start? All of these things, and every one of these gigantic business stories starts out with some serendipitous connection, right? I mean, Silicon Valley, as you all know, there are many books written about it and so on, is all about the Shockley 7, right? So ultimately, if Bill Shockley had not been a very difficult man, maybe Silicon Valley would never have happened. You know, all the 7 smart guys, Gordon Moore and Bill Packard and all these guys that he fired and that they all left him. And then went to Fairchild Computer. Fairchild Computer failed, and then ultimately all these guys left Fairchild Computer and went up Intel and Hewlett Packard, and all these things got started out of that. Now, all of these guys, they happen to get together in this one nexus. And it was just chance that happened. There's a similar story about Bangalore. How did the Bangalore cluster get started? We had a story about that. How did the Hinshu valleys in Taiwan get started? Now, Bangalore is the engine that's driving India today. Hinshu cluster is the engine that drove the Taiwan economy. So entire countries are driven by these accidental, serendipitous connections. And yet we sort of say it happened, oh, it was luck. It was luck, it was luck, it was luck. But it happened over and over and over and over again, every single one. So if every single major event comes from some kind of serendipitous connection, shouldn't we study this serendipity?
This gives me an idea. With Jebani, Asli and I, we're working on how resource-based we contributed to the IB. And you know, this never occurred to me about this luck part. You're coming back to it a couple of times in your talk, in your conversation. True, methodologically, we should be looking into luck. We cannot create it, but we can harness it, definitely. There's something in the harnessing part, in the appropriation part of luck. Yeah, there's definitely you're touching on something. So for the sake of time, I'm going to rush through my list of questions. Which IB questions are overly studied and the next generation should not even touch it because it's done already?
That's a very arrogant thing to do, is say, well, oh, I think it's already done. You shouldn't waste your time. So I don't want to be arrogant enough to say that, but so yeah, I think there are always new questions to be found, even in things that have been studied over and over and over again. We could have, Einstein could have said, well, Newton has fixed it all. Why should I go and study this all over again? But he did, and he found something, right? And 99.999% of the time, Newton is right. But Einstein's ideas are so gigantic. So yeah, there's always something to be studied in existing. I guess if I were to give advice to people, the younger scholars, I would say, don't ask the exact same question again. I think the creativity of contextualization is important, and I think I think that would be what I would suggest.
I'm surprised you didn't say market entry. That was the topping the scale. That was the winning answer on that one. Okay, the mentoring questions. What do you wish you'd known when you were starting out, and the lesson that you learned from it?
I guess ultimately, I was a very slow starter. It took me a long time to get going, and I started mentoring PhD students before I think I really was, before I should have, I guess, because I don't think I really had things really clarified in my mind yet. So I think other people, I'm sure, are better at this. So I'm not saying that my way is the right way at all. But I think when I started out, I wish I had known more about framing a research question. I think when I started, I started mentoring students. I was still learning, and coming out of economics, I think we were trained very heavily in methodologies. I was a very and you see this to some extent. You can see this in economics papers in the AER or the Journal of Finance, even today. It's a very back-end heavy papers, right? So ultimately, I was a very back-end guy. I was very focused about it's all a question of estimation. Let's get the estimation right. Identify the relationship, and don't worry about whether the relationship is really interesting at all, right? So don't worry about the front end. I think as I have grown older, I guess maybe I've gotten a little more mature. I think I realized the importance of the front end. The front end is really important. The question is important. So the research question is oftentimes the most important part of anything that you write. And how you actually answer it, your actual back end, is in this grand scheme of things, really only important to the extent that it's not wrong. So it's sort of like a hurdle you have to get over. But if you've asked a really good question, even if you didn't answer it right or perfectly, I think a lot of people will read it, because other people will fix a lot of your flaws moving along. I think there's if you go back and look over the Gibbs Decade Award winning papers, I can show you 4 or 5 of them are seriously wrong, actually, methodologically wrong, serious problem. But all of them asked a very good question. So that was the important thing. The reason why they became decade awarding papers is not because people are stupid and IB people don't understand that there are mistakes in these papers when they read them. Of course, most people recognize that there are weaknesses in the paper, but they say, notwithstanding the weaknesses, look at the very important question this person is asking. Look at the framing that they've put forward to this, and it makes me think. It makes me want to. If I read a junk paper which I'm not interested in, I'm not going to worry about replicating it. I don't want to do it all over again. If I read something that's really interesting, I say, well, actually, it's really interesting, but they didn't get it right. Suppose I answered it correctly, would I still get the same answer, or would I get a different answer? So I think that would be the way to think about it. So I think in terms of mentoring, I think I have learned that I increasingly try and tell my students to think about the question. think about a good question. If you got a good question, then worry about the framing, and then worry about data. I mean, not that data is not important, but the thing is, if you have a good question, a good framing, you can write a theory piece, even if you don't have the data. Right? Maybe the data will become available later.
Very important. These are brilliant points. Well, we're out of time. So last question. What is the one question that I should have asked you but didn't?
You've done a really good job. So it's hard. You've taken me over almost my personal to professional to hobby. What more can we talk about? I guess the one thing that you didn't ask, and which again the personal side of things that people may not be interested in, but ultimately I think all of us are members of kinship relationships and ties, and I guess family is very important. So I guess my family is very important to me. Your family is very important to you, and oftentimes, especially as academics, and especially early in our careers, when we're building our careers, we tend to take our family for granted. We tend to spend 16 hours a day working on our research, and don't take your family for granted. I think really your personal life, the whole thing that makes your life a journey, a rich journey. Think of all the pieces. Your work's only part of it. And if your work isn't fun, I think again that's the one thing that I guess maybe in closing I should say, and maybe you didn't ask it, but I'll say it anyway. You only get one life, so have fun. Your work should be fun, and your other things should be fun. And if you're going to spend 10, 12 hours a day on it, and if you're not enjoying it, you're in the wrong business.
You gave a lot of things to think about. I mean, you're making everyone who's watching this think their choices, their decisions, their priorities. This was very valuable. Thank you. Thank you for this interesting and very candid interview. I learned a lot. I'm sure a lot of people will agree with me. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, guys. And I really, again, I'd like to repeat that I am very honored to be in this distinguished company, and grateful to you for thinking of me in this context.
Thanks.
Have a wonderful day.